So I'll also start by thanking a lot of people. So first of all, the ICI and especially Christoph Holzi, Claudia Peppel, and Chris Wunsch, who supported the organization of this event. I'll thank the Istituto Italiano per gli Studi Filosofici Scuola di Roma, and especially Fiorinda and Paolo. And I will thank all the speakers, so, well, Paolo, Fiorinda, and Sarah for coming here. I would start by saying that this workshop was born at the intersection of different theoretical concerns. The current ICI project on constituting wholes, my own project on the notion of totality in Hegel and the French reception of Hegel, and the series of seminars organized by the Istituto Italiano per gli Studi Filosofici Scuola di Roma on the Via d'uscita dalle macerie, which focused on the topic of crisis. The subtitle of the conference, The Cunning of Totality, is somehow an illicit and improper coin. It explicitly recalls the Hegelian List der Vernunft, while operating at the same time a significant torsion of its meaning. As it is well known, this expression, famously employed by Hegel in his lectures on the philosophy of history, incisively became the emblem of his understanding of the course of the Weltgeschichte as the actualization of reason qua freedom in the world. Passions, private aims, and the satisfaction of self-desires are, according to Hegel, the most effective springs of actions. Nothing great in the world, he argued, has ever been accomplished without passion. However, the great and true result of history is located beyond that which individual interests aim at obtaining. Heroes, for example, are said to derive their vocation from an inner spirit, a concealed fount, hidden beneath the surface of the existing order that corresponds to the universal principle of reason. The idea of freedom on the one hand and the complex of human passions on the other constitute then the warp and the woof of the vast tapestry of universal history. However, the general idea, Hegel argues, is never exposed to the danger of the combats that affects every human and worldly matter. Rather, it remains in the background, untouched and uninjured. That was a quote from Hegel. This, he concluded, may be called the cunning of reason, that it sets the passion to work in its service, as a result of which the agents by which it gives itself existence must pay the penalty and suffer the loss. End of quote. If this is Hegel's conception of the List der Vernunft, to what extent, although improperly, can we think of a cunning of totality? Zizek recalls that cunning is something other than trickery. Indeed, the most open activity is the greatest cunning, since the cunning is precisely consists in the art of inducing something to be what it actually is. Cunning reveals more than it conspires. In this sense, the cunning of totality may be taught as the litmus paper of modern reason, self-proclaimed measure of all things. In fact, through the cunning of totality, modern reason declares that scientia potentia est, unveiling its extraordinary ambitions and damnations to totalize meaning, truth, and history. And at the same time, through the cunning of totality, modern reason keeps haunting and troubling postmodern and anti-modern efforts to supersede it. If, as Merleau-Ponty argues in The Adventures of the Dialectic, I quote, the false modesty of understanding doesn't get around the problem of the whole, end of quote, one could identify the cunning of totality precisely with the ghostly presence of a totality drive, of an immanent impulse that resurrects in spite of all attempts that have been made to repress it. And since the cunning of totality resists the weapons of denial, negation, and annihilation employed against it, the unbearable dream of modern reason turns into the inescapable nightmare of anti-modern thought, the torment of totality. But this is also a very partial version of the story. And the other one, the other version, is the wreck of totality. Indeed, the cunning of totality not only weaves the web of history of thought, but it ends up being bridled in the tangles of its own weave. Unlike Hegel's List der Vernunft, the cunning of totality doesn't remain untouched nor uninjured. It is actually suffered as much as it is acted. At this point, the torment of totality turns against totality itself, showing the untenability of its task and invoking its reversal as a contrapasso. It is the end that never ends, the absolute that turns out to be conditioned, language without meaning, history abandoned into the hands of chance, freedom that oppresses. The Italian philosopher Salvatore Natoli wrote that modernity was born timid and died with arrogance. One could say the opposite of the thought of totality, that was born with arrogance and aged with hesitancy.